My name is Liam Barrett, 37 years old. 6 months ago, I was drowning in the concrete jungle of Seattle. 60-hour work weeks as a software developer, traffic jams, and the constant noise of the city slowly crushing my spirit. My doctor said my blood pressure was concerning for someone my age. That's when my wife Emily and I decided we needed a change. We found the listing online, a secluded cabin in the Olympic Peninsula wilderness, surrounded by towering pines and pristine nature. The price was surprisingly affordable. Need some work, the listing mentioned, but the photos showed a charming rustic structure with potential. The realtor, a nervous man with darting eyes, rushed through the paperwork when we made an offer. "Not many city folks last out here," he muttered almost to himself. "Too isolated." We should have asked more questions. We should have wondered why the previous owners left so hastily that dishes remained in the sink and clothes still hung in the closets. But we were too enchanted by our escape from urban life to notice the warning signs. The first 2 weeks were idyllic. I repaired the leaking roof while Emily planted a vegetable garden. In the evenings, we'd sit on the porch with glasses of wine, watching the sunset paint the forest in gold. The silence was intoxicating after years of city noise. Just bird song during the day and crickets at night. At least that's what we thought the sounds were. The first incident happened during our 3rd week. I was chopping firewood when I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, the unsettling feeling of being watched. I turned toward the tree line and froze. Something stood between the trees, partially hidden in shadow. Something tall, much taller than a man, and unnaturally still. "Hello," I called, thinking it might be a hiker or perhaps the reclusive neighbor the realtor had vaguely mentioned lived somewhere deeper in the forest. No response, just unblinking eyes reflecting the afternoon sun. I set down my axe and stepped toward the trees. Whatever it was retreated deeper into the forest, not running but moving with deliberate, calculated steps. That night I woke to a sound I'd never heard before, a low, rumbling growl outside our bedroom window. Not a bear or a cougar, something else, something that sounded almost deliberate, testing, hunting. Emily slept peacefully beside me as I lay rigid, listening as whatever it was circled our cabin, dragging what sounded like claws along the wooden exterior. The scratching continued for hours, methodically moving around the perimeter as if searching for a way in. In the morning, I examined the cabin walls and found deep gouges in the wood, too high for any normal animal to reach. When I showed Emily, she suggested it might be a bear, but her voice trembled with uncertainty. The strange incidents multiplied. Tools I'd leave in the yard would be gone in the morning, sometimes appearing days later, arranged in bizarre patterns on our porch. Emily's garden was repeatedly destroyed overnight. The soil churned up as if by massive paws. Once I found enormous footprints in the mud near our well, elongated, with what appeared to be claw marks at the tips. Too large for any human, too strange for any animal I recognized. We began locking our doors religiously, and I kept my father's old hunting rifle loaded and nearby, though I'd never been much of a hunter. One morning, I decided to hike deeper into the forest to investigate where our unwelcome visitor might be coming from. Emily begged me not to go, but I assured her I'd be back before dark. The forest grew denser the farther I went, the canopy overhead blocking out more and more sunlight until I walked in an eerie twilight, despite it being midday. The usual forest sounds, birds, squirrels, insects, gradually faded into an oppressive silence. The air felt heavy, primal, as if I'd stepped back in time to when these woods were untouched by human presence. After hiking for about an hour, I came upon a clearing. In its center stood a cabin far older than ours. The logs blackened with age, the roof partially collapsed. No smoke rose from the chimney, and the single window I could see was boarded up from the inside. "Hello," I called, approaching cautiously. "Anyone home?" The silence was absolute. Not even the wind disturbed the leaves. As I drew closer, a putrid smell hit me, like rotting meat mixed with wet dog and something unmistakably metallic. Blood. Something had died here, recently. I raised my rifle and circled the decrepit structure. Behind the cabin, I found what remained of a deer, or what I initially thought was a deer. The carcass had been torn apart, not like a natural predator hunting for food, but methodically, almost ritualistically. Parts were missing. Others were arranged in patterns that made my stomach churn. Then I noticed the tracks leading away from the grisly scene. The same elongated footprints I'd found near our well, but fresher, clearer. They led into the trees on the far side of the clearing, disappearing into shadow. Something crashed in the undergrowth beyond the tree line. A guttural, inhuman sound followed. Not quite a growl, not quite a snarl, but something that raised every hair on my body. I ran. Branches whipped my face as I sprinted back the way I'd come, fear propelling me faster than I'd ever moved. Behind me, something pursued, not noisily crashing through the forest as a panicked animal might, but with calculated rhythmic movements. Gaining. I didn't look back until I burst from the tree line near our cabin. When I finally dared to turn, nothing was there. But I knew it had let me go. This time. Emily was waiting on the porch, her face pale with worry. When I told her what I'd found, she insisted we leave immediately. I was inclined to agree, but night was falling, and I didn't want to navigate the narrow forest roads in darkness. We'll leave first thing tomorrow, I promised. That night, the sounds around our cabin intensified. No longer just scratching, but heavy objects being dragged across our porch, sniffing at our doors and windows. Low, rumbling growls that seemed to come from something massive. And worst of all, a sound like laughter, distorted and inhuman, but unmistakably deliberate. Neither of us slept. We sat in the living room, backs to the wall, my rifle pointed at the door, as the thing outside tested our defenses until dawn finally broke. In the harsh light of morning, we found our car destroyed, tires slashed, engine torn apart, driver's door ripped completely off its hinges. Something had made sure we couldn't leave. "We need to walk to the main road," Emily said, her voice surprisingly steady. Flag down a passing car. It was our only option. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and our cell phones had never gotten reception this deep in the forest. The main road was approximately 5 miles from our cabin, a long walk, but doable in daylight. We packed essential supplies in backpacks, and I brought my rifle and all the ammunition I had. As we prepared to leave, Emily froze, staring out the kitchen window. "Liam," she whispered, "look." Something had been left on our porch, a crude arrangement of bones and fur that I recognized with horror as the remains of our closest neighbor's dog, a friendly German shepherd we'd met when we first moved in, placed deliberately at our door like a warning, or a promise. We left through the back door, moving as quietly as possible into the forest. I knew the direction of the main road, and we kept the morning sun to our right as we picked our way through the underbrush, avoiding the trail where we might be easily followed. For the first hour, we heard nothing unusual, just the natural sounds of the forest returning now that daylight had come. Emily began to relax slightly, even managing a small smile when a deer bounded across our path. Then the forest went silent again. We froze, listening. Nothing. Not a bird call, not an insect chirp. Just our own breathing and the pounding of my heart. "Keep moving," I whispered. "Faster now." We picked up our pace, no longer caring about stealth. We were still at least 3 miles from the road when we heard it, a howl that was nothing like a wolf's, deeper, more guttural, with an almost human quality that made my skin crawl. And close, too close. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Emily's hand. We crashed through the undergrowth, abandoning any pretense of a carefully chosen path. Behind us, something large moved through the forest, branches snapping, brush crushed underfoot. Not running yet, but matching our pace, hurting us. I realized with growing horror that we were being driven away from the direction of the road, deeper into unfamiliar territory. But changing course would bring us directly toward our pursuer. We burst into a small clearing and stopped short at the edge of a steep ravine. 20 feet below, a rocky stream bed promised broken bones if we attempted to descend quickly. "We have to find another way around," Emily gasped, out of breath. The sounds of pursuit had stopped. The forest was silent again, watchful. I scanned the tree line, rifle raised. Nothing moved, but I could feel its presence. Waiting, calculating. "This way," I said, leading Emily along the edge of the ravine, hoping to find a spot where we could safely descend. We'd gone perhaps 50 yards when Emily screamed. From the trees ahead of us emerged a nightmare. It stood over 7 feet tall, its body a grotesque hybrid of human and wolf. Powerful limbs covered in dark matted fur ended in hands, not paws, with elongated fingers tipped with black claws. Its chest and torso had a vaguely human structure, but were too large, too muscular, covered in scars and patches of coarse hair. And its face, God, its face. A wolf's muzzle, elongated and filled with yellow teeth, but with eyes that were terrifyingly aware. Human eyes glinting with malevolent intelligence. It stood upright, blocking our path, head tilted as if curious about our reaction to its full revelation. I raised my rifle and fired without hesitation. The creature jerked as the bullet struck its shoulder, but it didn't fall. Instead, it looked down at the wound, already closing before our eyes. Then back at us, its muzzle pulling back in what I can only describe as a grin. It charged. I fired again, aiming for its head this time, but it moved with impossible speed. The bullet grazed its ear and it didn't even slow. "The ravine!" I shouted, pushing Emily toward the edge. "Jump!" It was our only chance. Emily hesitated for just a second, then leapt into space. I turned to follow, but massive claws raked across my back, shredding my jacket and skin beneath. The pain was blinding. Somehow I still jumped, tumbling down the steep slope in a shower of dirt and stones. I landed hard on the stream bed below, the impact driving the air from my lungs. Emily was already on her feet, pulling me up. "Liam, you're back." "No time," I gasped. "Run. Follow the stream." Above us, the creature paced along the edge of the ravine, watching. It could easily descend, but it seemed to be calculating, considering. We splashed downstream, using the water to hide our scent. My back burned with every movement, but fear drove me forward. After about half a mile, the stream widened and deepened, flowing through a culvert beneath what appeared to be a dirt road. "This might lead to the highway," Emily said hopefully. We followed the road, moving as quickly as my injury would allow. The forest was quieter here, more managed, suggesting human presence nearby. Hope began to build. Then Emily stopped suddenly. "Listen." In the distance, the unmistakable rumble of an engine. A vehicle was approaching. We waved frantically as an old pickup truck came into view. The driver, an elderly man with a weathered face, slowed and rolled down his window, eyes widening at my blood-soaked back. "Jesus Christ, what happened to you folks?" "Please," Emily begged. "We need to get to town. There's something in the woods." The old man's expression changed, from concern to something like grim recognition. "Get in," he said, reaching across to open the passenger door. "Quickly now." We climbed in, and he accelerated immediately, glancing repeatedly in his rearview mirror. "You from that new cabin off Blackwood Trail?" he asked. I nodded, wincing as the truck hit a pothole, sending fresh pain through my shredded back. "Damn realtor," the old man muttered. "Selling that place again. Ought to be burned to the ground." "You know about the creature?" Emily asked. The man was silent for a long moment, focused on navigating the narrow dirt road. Finally, he spoke. "Been in these parts all my life. Grew up on stories about the Blackwood beast. Thought they were just tales to scare children." He glanced at my bloody back. "Till about 15 years ago. He told us how a research team had come to study the old-growth forest in the area. 5 scientists, well-equipped, established a base camp near what was now our cabin. After a week, they stopped checking in. Search parties found only one survivor, driven mad by what he'd seen, babbling about a monster that walked like a man but hunted like a wolf. Since then, folks steer clear of those woods," the old man said. "Local authorities write off the disappearances as hiking accidents or animal attacks. Easier that way." "Why didn't anyone warn us?" Emily demanded, anger cutting through her fear. The old man's face hardened. "Money talks. That property's been sold 5 times in 15 years. Never stays on the market long." He drove us directly to the small regional hospital, where doctors cleaned and stitched the 4 deep parallel gashes running from my right shoulder to left hip. They accepted the story about a bear attack without question, exchanging knowing glances when we mentioned the location of our cabin. While I was being treated, Emily arranged for a hotel room in town. We had no intention of returning to the cabin, not even for our belongings. The next day, I contacted the local sheriff, a broad-shouldered woman with tired eyes who listened to our story, edited to describe a bear attack without surprise. "We've had similar reports from that area," she said carefully, "always around the full moon." "It wasn't a bear," I insisted. "It walked upright. It had hands." The sheriff studied me for a long moment. "Mr. Barrett, I've lived in this county all my life. My advice? Sell that property as quickly as you can and put this all behind you." We did exactly that, accepting a significant financial loss to expedite the sale. The same realtor handled the transaction, avoiding our eyes when we confronted him about his failure to disclose the property's history. "It's just local superstition," he insisted weakly. "Nothing's ever been proven." The new owners were a young couple from Portland, excited about their secluded forest retreat. I wanted to warn them, but what could I say that wouldn't sound like madness? We moved back to Seattle, where the constant noise of the city now feels comforting rather than oppressive. The scars on my back have healed into 4 silvery lines that ache when the weather changes or when the full moon rises. Sometimes in my dreams, I'm back in those woods, running through endless trees while something hunts me with patient, terrible intelligence. I wake gasping, convinced I can hear scratching at our apartment window, 17 floors above street level. Emily suggests therapy. I've considered it, but what would I say? That we encountered a werewolf? That monsters are real? Last week I received a text message from an unknown number. Just a news article link. 3 hikers had gone missing in the Olympic Peninsula, last seen near a recently purchased cabin off Blackwood Trail. I didn't tell Emily. What good would it do? But I checked the lunar calendar now, marking the full moons with a sense of dread and strange responsibility. And sometimes, when the city feels too confining, I catch myself missing the quiet of the forest, the clean air, the isolation. In dark moments, I wonder if it let me live for a reason, if it's waiting for me to return. Perhaps most disturbing of all, sometimes I want to.